In this video, I'm going to walk you through a bunch of cinematic moves and essentially giving you a playbook that you can use and execute the next time you find yourself flying out on location. When you get on location, at least I did this when I got started, I was thinking, well, yeah, I have a beautiful spot, but what do I do now, right? How do I get something that looks cool? And just knowing something and recognizing something that looks cool is very different than knowing how to execute it, right? So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to walk you through a series of simple moves, starting with no movement at all, just letting the movement in the scene take over, and then walk you through just a simple move, just one motion of the joystick, and then we're going to work our way up to more dynamic moves using multiple joysticks at the same time. And if you remember the names, you can watch the video again or you can consult the list below. What you're going to wind up with is a foundation. You're going to wind up with a methodology that you can use and approaches you can take the next time you're out shooting with your drone on location. I think this is going to be so helpful for you. It was for me when I started writing them down, and I think it's going to be helpful for you too. All right, so let's get started. The first move here, the static shot. This is the easiest to execute because we don't have to do anything. All we do is hover and the drone's going to do that automatically. The key to this shot is you just need something that looks cool without any motion of the drone. So you need some sort of motion in the scene, whether that be clouds, whether that be crashing waves, for instance. You just want something in the scene that's moving, and when it is moving, it looks cool. So for our next shot, we have the ascend or crane up. You simply just press up on the left joystick, and that's just going to lift the drone in the air, and watch what happens when it does, right? You're just revealing what's behind the immediate foreground and instantly creating a sense of depth and dimension in the scene. Now, conversely, we can do the crane down or the descend, and it's just the same thing in reverse. The next shot we have is the fly forward, or what we call the dolly in. You're simply just flying forward in space. When you press up on that right joystick, you're just going to move forward in the process. And this just gives a sense of energy and motion in the scene. It's a very simple shot and very easy to execute. Now in reverse, we can fly backwards. We just press down and we're just going to reverse into a scene. And what will happen is it gives a different sense of energy. It's great to use at the end of a story. It also reveals a part of the scene that we don't see in the initial shot, right? And this is a really key technique in cinematic moves. We're going to get into it a little bit more later on in this video, but this is the first and actually simplest way that we can introduce a reveal into our shots. The next shot we have, the tilt up. Now this is a classic move and it's a simple move to do. Typically, this is used in conjunction with other moves, but just to show you what we need to do to create a simple tilt up or tilt down, we just have to move our gimbal. In order to do that, there's a little wheel on the back of the controller, and we can use our pointer finger here to move the gimbal up or down. Next up, we have our rotate, left or right, or yaw as we call it. You might hear me reference this term later on as well. And it's simply just rotating to the left or rotating the right. And you can see it's just a simple basic shot. And just like tilting up and down, typically this is used not by itself, but in conjunction with another movement as well. So now that we covered the simple moves, let's talk about the complex moves. Now, they're not complicated, they're complex. And the reason why they're complex is because we're moving more than one joystick at the same time. So for instance, we can dolly in or push forward and then also move up or down at the same time. So they're not difficult, it's just, it takes a little bit of getting used to, sort of like driving a car, right? We have to focus on the gas pedal, and then we also have to focus on the steering wheel, and it takes a little bit of time to get comfortable with doing both at the same time. That's exactly what we're doing here with the joysticks. So let's get started, because I think once you master these, it's gonna take your aerial drone videos to a whole new level. So the first move we have is the crane up with a tilt down. So we press up on the left joystick, and with our pointer finger on the gimbal, you simply just rotate it a little bit until the camera starts pointing down. And when we combine them, we get this beautiful energetic movement in the scene. We're creating parallax between the foreground and the background. Next up, we have the approach reveal. We're gonna fly forward by pressing up on that right joystick. And at the same time, we're gonna use our pointer finger to move the gimbal upwards. So we start by looking down, we press up on the right joystick, and then we use our index finger to move the gimbal upwards towards the horizon. And what that gives us is a shot with a lot of energy that also reveals the horizon. It's a much more interesting shot than simply just flying forward, as you can see. Now, conversely, we can reverse this to a degree, and we get one of my favorite moves that's called the retreat reveal. And all that is flying backwards, putting the car in reverse. We're just gonna press down on that right joystick, and then I'm gonna press up on that gimbal with my pointer finger too. And what that's gonna do is reveal the horizon as I fly backwards. The key to the shot is that you start looking down first, you fly backwards, and then very, very subtly, you press up on that tilt wheel. The next shot we have is the grand reveal. Now to execute this, we simply just have to press up on the left joystick and we press down or back on the right joystick. And what that does, especially if we start close to a subject in a large landscape, it reveals the scene that the subject is in. It reveals the grandeur of that large landscape in the process, especially if we hold those sticks long enough and allow that scene to develop over time. This is why it works so well in large landscapes, and that's why we call it the grand reveal. It works great in grand scenes. The next shot we have is the classic reveal, and this is classic for a reason. It works every single time. Now to execute it, all we need to do is press up on the left joystick. That's gonna lift our drone up, and we press up on the right joystick. That's gonna move us forward at the same time. Now what really makes this shot work is if you have something in the foreground that's blocking what's behind it. And as we approach that scene, and as we reveal the background, it just creates this beautiful shot, and it's a surprise for the viewer. Next up, we have the orbit. Now this can be automated, and I'm just gonna show you how to do it in another video, that's fine. But what's most important here is that we have the shot in mind in the first place. We know what we wanna execute. So all we need to do to execute this is press one direction on the right joystick, and then press the opposite direction on the left joystick. So if we move right on the right joystick, we move left on the left joystick. And what that's gonna do is allow us to create a circle as we keep our point of interest right in the middle of the frame. So the next shot we have is a variation of this orbit, and this is what I call the arc. We're gonna press up on the right joystick, and we're also just gonna look with the left joystick. So what we're doing is flying forward, and we're looking in the direction we're going to fly. So whichever direction we look, the drone's gonna take a natural arc path to get there. And it just gives us a little bit more energy. It's simple, it's easy to execute, and I think you're gonna love this shot. So you'll notice that we have more complex movements now. Now we're gonna build on from there. So instead of simply circling around a scene now, we're gonna introduce another element where we fly up at the same time we circle. And we call that a helix. To execute this, all we have to do is press right on our right joystick and then press up and to the left on our left joystick. What that's gonna do is allow us to move to the right while also looking to the left and flying upwards at the same time. So just try this out. Once you get this down, I think you're gonna love this shot. This is one of my favorites. So one of the coolest shots that we can execute is what I call the fly through. Now to execute a move like this, there's no specific joystick movements, right? We can either just fly forward, and that's sometimes all we need to do, and sometimes we combine it with our left joystick where we look left or right depending on what we're shooting. But essentially, to pull this off, all we really need is a tight space or an object that we can fly close enough to. And if we do that, if we fly close enough to the object or we fly inside these tight spaces, we get a sense of speed, we get a sense of depth in a scene that's hard to convey unless you just see it. Next up, we have our tracking shot. You need a subject here, that's important, and we can introduce ways of automating tracking that subject. That's why we call it a tracking shot. When we start moving with the subject and we match the pace of that subject, you have motion both with the subject and the drone at the same time, and you have twice the amount of energy in the scene when you do that. This is where it does pay off to get a little bit more comfortable with the controls, to practice a little bit, because the more you practice and the smoother that you can execute these shots, especially the more complicated ones, the cooler your videos are gonna look. So for the next shot, I have what's called the Dolly Zoom, or what I really call the Jaws effect, and that might help you remember it. So take a look at some of these examples here. Now, what the heck is going on, right? I remember seeing this in Jaws. I was like, what is going on here? To execute this, all we really need to do is fly backwards on a clearly defined subject and zoom in at the same time. And that's what creates that effect. Essentially, our subject remains the same size, but because we're flying backwards, we're moving away from that subject and we're zooming in, the background gets larger and larger and larger. And we can reverse that, right? We can fly forwards and then zoom out, and that background will get smaller and smaller and smaller. So that takes care of many of the complex movements, right? And I encourage you to try and experiment and find your own that you like. I just wanted to give you a place to start, a foundation, and a bit of a methodology that you can use in how you approach the scenes. Now, beyond this, there's actually some really cool shots I haven't talked about because I wanted to keep them separate, and mostly because it introduces a completely new perspective that we're not used to seeing as photographers. And that's, of course, the top down. So whenever we're flying above something, we have the opportunity to look down on that. And that's something you can only do with a drone. So it's not a common thing for us to even think about as photographers until we start flying a drone. But if we introduce this perspective and we start using this both in our photos and our videos, it gives us a whole new way of seeing the world and sharing it with others as well. So I wanted to keep it separate. So the first shot, just like we started in the beginning of this video, is just a static frame. All we need to do is fly above something cool and simply hover there and look straight down. Everything just looks so much cooler from that perspective. It really emphasizes something that we could never see with our eyes from the ground. So now we're going to introduce a little bit more complex movements into this top-down perspective. The first one being simply flying forward. But with this top-down perspective, everything looks cooler because we don't know what's going to happen next in the frame, right? So anytime we don't know where we're going to end up from where we start, something cool happens. So a pro tip when you're executing this shot is just to keep in mind you want to start somewhere interesting and you also want to finish somewhere interesting. And ideally, you have some interesting stuff along the way, right? Next shot we have is a top-down reveal. This is such a simple movement to do, but it's very effective. So first we start by looking top down, right? We look straight down on the scene and we simply press up on the left joystick. It's such a simple shot to execute, and when it's done right, it just looks so cool. Now you can reverse it, of course, and instead of revealing the shot, you get closer to it. You focus on a specific subject or detail in the scene, and so it brings you closer to the action. So another cool thing we can do with this top-down perspective is what I call the top-down glide or slider. So here's how we execute this. We start with that top-down shot, just as the other ones, but then we simply just move left or right on that right joystick. And what that does is simply allow us to slide across the scene, revealing something from the left to the right or the right to the left, but allows us to reveal something from the horizontal axis. And it's not the typical angle, it's not the typical shot that I see executed very often. So these are all the moves I wanted to introduce you to, and we have a playbook for all of them now, right? These are all shots that are going to be in your back pocket that you can execute the next time you're in a beautiful location with beautiful light. Now what's important here is I just listed 23 different shots that we can execute. You don't have to get all of them perfect here, but you do want to practice to make sure that you're able to execute them right off the bat when that moment counts, right? Now, I will say this though, in the next videos coming up in this module, I'm gonna be walking you through not just how to execute these, exactly what I showed you, because you need to know what you want to execute before you know how to execute it. I'm also going to show you how we can automate that process, making the entire thing a lot simpler as well. So stay tuned, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll see you in the next video. This was just a free preview of the Drone Mastery course. In this course, you're gonna learn everything that you need to know to fly a drone, to capture amazing photos and incredibly stunning cinematic videos as well. So whether you're an absolute beginner or an experienced drone pilot, there's something in here that you're gonna learn that's gonna elevate your photography and your videography to a completely new level. So if that sounds interesting to you, click on that link below and I will see you in the full version of this course.